ask your blessing on our time, that we would better understand, even though we're reviewing parts of your scripture that are very familiar to us. I pray that it would be fresh as far as the impact it has on our lives, so that it will be just further shaped and molded into the kind of men you want us to be. I just ask for growth and moving a little closer to you as a result of being together tonight. That's my request in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. Now, what I thought you asked earlier. We're in chapter 22
yes.
of Luke. 21. We're not
31.
30.
22, 31.
Thank you.
32. Okay.
Okay, not chapter 30.
It's been a really long
22.
day. So, yeah. All right. Luke 22, 31. We turn there in my Bible, so we're on the same page.
Almost.
Yeah.
I thought we made it through 32.
He said Simon. What you said?
Right. This is there's the section we left off with.
Okay.
Right.
Let's, even if we talked about, let's just go ahead and review these last two verses. First of all, when he says Simon, Simon, does that surprise you that he's calling him Simon?
Yes.
Why does that surprise you? It surprises me too. Yeah, he gave him another name. When's the last time he called him Simon?
Back before he was in power.
Yeah, it's very interesting. At the very beginning, he calls him Simon. And here, this is before he goes to the cross. He calls him Simon. And then, after the resurrection, when he's out fishing, and Simon comes in with John, and they come to the shore, he says, Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me? 3 different times he asks him if he loves him. And he says, feed my sheep. Do you remember that episode?
Yeah.
And the significance of asking him 3 times is probably directly related to his denying 3 times. Okay. Not to push this any too far, but names are very significant in the Bible. And I honestly am not sure we can push it too far. Do you have more than one name?
Yes.
Sure. People call us different things, right? But at times, when they use a different name, there's a reason why they use a different name.
Get your attention.
Excuse me?
Get your attention.
Sometimes to get your attention.
Like when my dad would say, Mr. Rollins, and I'm like, whoa.
Okay.
He doesn't call me Mr. Rollins. That's his name.
Okay. Or if I were talking to Randall, instead of calling him Mr. Stokes, I said, well, Mr. Engineer.
Yeah.
And I spoke to him, what would you think I'd be talking about?
Some kind of engineering project or something.
Yes. And so when we go back to Simon, instead of Peter, which means the rock, which means rock, which is the name given to him by Jesus, it's kind of like, are you really the person that I've trained? Are you going back to being the person before you were with me? Well, right before he's an apostle, because he says, Simon, Simon, Satan has asked to sift all of you as wheat. What's the idea of sifting of wheat?
Separate the chaff.
Yeah, but yeah, usually the chaff was separated before, but there were still impurities.
Mm-hmm.
And so even after it's been ground and the chaff is out, they would go through that sifting. Did any of you, when I was a little kid, my mom had this thing. She put the flour she bought from the store in there, and she cranked that thing around, and it would dust out down below and get the chunks out or whatever. It was called a sifter,
Right.
and it's just the idea, the concept of separating the good from the bad. Well, why would Satan want to separate the good from the bad?
He wants the bad part.
Okay.
Wants to get the good out of you.
I agree with that. He wants the bad part. Can you think of any other reason? How about this story when God says to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? There's nobody like him on the whole planet, right? And Satan responds by saying, oh yeah, he's pretty good. No, what does he say?
Well, he likes you because you blessed him.
Yeah. But if you let me mess with him, I'll prove what? I'll sift him. I'll prove there's some bad in him. So it's kind of like Satan's trying to make his case. Hey, I can find bad in anybody, right? And so he's made that request. Well, how does Jesus say this? He's asked to sift all of you. So, by the way, why are we focusing on Peter more than all of them?
He's the one that denies it 3 times later.
He is the one who denied him 3 times. What did the other guys do?
They ran.
They ran away. That's exactly right. If you want to be the forefront guy when things are good, guess what? You got to be the forefront guy when things are bad too. If you want to be the vocal guy, you're the vocal guy, right? And so if you want to be sit in the front of the class and always be the one with the visual aids, then here you go. And so Peter is that guy, and he says, "But I have prayed for you, Simon, that your faith may not fail. And when you have turned back, strengthen your brothers." What does that mean?
Turned away.
It means, okay, I don't want you to fail, but after you pick yourself back up, right? In other words, he's saying, Satan has asked for this, and I'm fully expecting you're going to mess up. You're going to mess up. But don't, just because you mess up doesn't mean it's over. So make sure you've turned back and strengthen. Okay, that last phrase there too, and strengthen your brothers. One of the things going through hardship that ought to be a benefit is we use that to help other people. 2 Corinthians chapter 1, Paul makes the point, we experience some hardship beyond our ability to bear. That phrase always gets me. Because 1 Corinthians 10 says, God won't let Satan tempt you beyond your ability to bear it. But it never says, God won't let you suffer beyond your ability. And Paul literally says that. It's beyond our ability. But we understood, forget the way he phrases it, we knew or we understood that what we were going through is so that we might be comforted, so that we might be able to comfort you. So in other words, Paul was saying, we went through some of the stuff we went through. It wasn't our fault. But we went through it, not for our benefit. We didn't need to learn a lesson. But we went through it so that we might be able to help somebody else. Okay, we're going to pick up here in just a minute, but if I can share something personal with you. My personal devotions the Saturday was really unusual to me because, you know, my situation with both my folks, especially my dad. And maybe you haven't said it, but I have had probably half a dozen people, if not closer to a dozen people, ask me something to the effect, yeah, why does God let him, I mean, he's already lost his mind and stuff, so he was God's servant for most of his life, right? He served God, so now his mind's not there, why doesn't God take him home? I see no purpose in him just hanging on for a few more years if his mind's not working. I've had several people ask me that question. Well, my devotions on Saturday, Jesus is talking with Peter at the end of the Gospel of John, and he says to him, when you were young, you used to put on your own clothes, and you went wherever you wanted to go. But when you're old, and by the way, John says, he's telling him this to let him know how he's going to die. So when you're old, you're going to stretch out your hands and somebody else is going to put clothes on you. And they're going to take you where you don't want to go. And then the very next phrase, it says, Jesus was showing him by what death he would glorify God. And it just, because of what I'm going through right now personally, or what's going on in my family, just hit me. Glorify God by not being able to dress yourself and people take you where you don't want to go. That kind of sounds like my dad right now. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, you got no control. But Jesus said, you can still glorify God. I still haven't wrapped my mind around that, but it just makes me think, how do we glorify God? We just say, God's got this. He knows what he's doing. Even when we don't. Maybe it's just again, maybe it's not about us. Maybe it's about other people. When you don't understand stuff, is that when you stop believing in God? Of course not, because He's God. So when things happen in life maybe that's one of the ways we glorify. I don't know. I'm still trying to chew on that. But anyway, this idea of when you have turned back, strengthen your brothers. Just remember, it's not always about us, right? Sometimes what we go through does make us stronger, better people, but sometimes it's not about us at all. So we can help somebody else, and I'll just review this real quick. I sure don't want to hit any raw nerves or anything like that, but we have had a huge number of miscarriages in this church. Yeah, more than you would think. And
More than any other church.
just my personal hunch is that maybe that's why God put a lot of people together, because other people have gone through it. And it's the kind of thing that it's very much like we think of a death in the family if somebody's already been born. Well, this is a death in the family before they've been born. And it really, some parents, it's exactly the same. It's exactly the same. But I can't help to think that maybe some of our young people have gone through that for the benefit of helping some of the other young couples who are going through it.
I'm sure of it.
Right?
Because I have a friend of mine who had a heart attack. I think you met him, Steve.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. He called me last week and he says, "You're not going to believe who I got going to our Bible study. Like 80% of my pool hall, and I'm a pool tournament. Do pool tournaments." And I'm like, "Really?" And he goes, "Yeah, I can't believe it. And you know why? My heart attack. I can relate to some of these guys that are there that have had heart attacks. Now, you'd be surprised how many people that play pool have had heart attacks." And I'm just like,
they used to be weightlifters, now they're playing pool.
He said, "It's weird, but I'm using it as a platform." I said,
look
"Go,
forward to
man,
it.
do it."
I love it. I love it. I love that idea. Okay, Rick, I'm going to start with you if that's okay, and we'll go around the table this way. Let's get verses 33. Wow. Yeah, let's get 33 through 37. 38. 38. Yeah.
33. But he replied, "Lord, I'm ready to go with you to prison and to death." Jesus answered, "I tell you, Peter, before the rooster crows today, you will deny 3 times that you know me." Then Jesus asked them, "When I sent you without purse, bag, or sandals, did you lack anything?" "Nothing," they answered. He said to them, "But now if you have a purse, take it, and also a bag. If you don't have a sword, sell your cloak and buy one. It is written, 'And he was numbered with the transgressors.' And I tell you, this must be fulfilled in me. Yes, what is written about me is reaching its fulfillment." Then the disciples said, "See, Lord, here are 2 swords." "That's enough," he replied.
Yeah, this is a really interesting passage. I should have broken it up a little differently, but verses 33 and 34, we're going to come back to this because he tells Peter makes that bold claim, "I'm ready to die with you." And I do want to emphasize Luke doesn't get the wording the same that Matthew does, but it's as though Peter is saying, everybody else is going to let you down, but I love you more than these. I'm better. And Jesus uses that same phrase 3 times. "Do you really love me more than these?" After he denied him, right? So it's kind of like throwing right back in his face. But he tells him ahead of time it's going to happen, as Jesus frequently does, so that after it happens, they'll remember that he told them ahead of time. That verifies who he is and his claims, but it also helps them learn. We'll connect the dots with that when we get over to Peter's actual denial. The next thing he says to the whole group of the disciples, or the 11 anyway, is he reminds them of when he sent them out, right? In verse 35, without purse or bag or sandals. And what was the point? This wasn't too many weeks ago that we talked about this, but what was the point of him telling them, don't take a purse, don't take anything with you?
Yeah, just relying on God for everything.
Trust God. Trust God, totally depend on Him. Okay. Compared to that, though, He's warning them it's going to be much worse. It's going to be much worse. And there's another element to this. Not only is it going to be worse, I'm not going to be here for you to fall back on. And so He goes ahead and tells them, this time, take a purse or a bag. Take a purse and a bag. And if you don't have a sword, buy one. Okay. This is the part that really gets people kind of tripped up. Probably what He's talking about is when He says, if you don't have a sword, buy one. As it is written, He was numbered with the transgressors. Does that sound familiar to anyone? Do you know where that comes from? Isaiah 53. It's exactly right. The famous suffering servant. Okay, they're going to treat me as though I'm an outlaw. And He's just basically saying, be prepared. That's why you need all these supplies, and you need a sword. I'm not so sure He meant that the way the disciples took it. And I'll tell you why. Because after He says this, He's emphasizing the fact these things have to be fulfilled, what was written about Him, how people are going to mistreat Him, and it's going to be really bad. How bad? Like when people whip out the swords. And then they say, well, we've got 2 swords. And I really think Jesus is like, okay. Not, well, yeah, I'll go buy some more or what. No, it's not His real point. That's not what He's really saying. And the reason I think that is look over to verse, 50. One of them struck the servant of the high priest, cutting his right ear. Verse 51, but Jesus answered, no more of this. So they had a sword, and by the way, who had this sword?
Peter.
Yeah, why am I surprised?
No.
Why am I not surprised? We got 2 swords, and Peter said, well, I'm going to take one of those. I'm guessing. But whatever, he grabs that sword,
Yeah, right.
and when he actually uses that sword, Jesus reprimands him for using it. That's why I don't think Jesus meant it's time to go out and buy all the ammunition you can get and stuff like that. We did have a gentleman in the church here, I don't know if you remember him or not, at the close of every service, when we would dismiss, he would shout from the back, glory be unto God. And he came to the men's Bible study. He's no longer with us, but in a sense he is, because his wife put his ashes underneath the stage in the church.
Oh, wow.
Which one day we were doing renovations and Seth didn't know what it was and threw it away.
Well, she'll never know.
Because, it's a long story how that happened. But anyway, his widow's name is Doris. Do you remember who this is?
Yeah.
They lived on a boat.
Yeah.
And he's the only guy I know who's been kicked out of hospice 4 times in a row. Got so bad they sent him down to hospice. When he was in hospice, he got all better. They said, you don't need to be here. They sent him home. Yeah. And a week or 2 later, he was so bad, they sent him back to hospice. And then they said, you don't need to be here. Kept going back and forth until the 4th or 5th time he finally died. I'm sorry to digress. He came to men's study, and he discovered this verse one week. And when he discovered this verse, he kept reading it. He said, go buy a sword. Gentlemen, we all need to buy guns. And he gave a whole speech. God says right here through His word that we're supposed to. Which, by the way, I don't think there's any problem with having a gun. I do think there's a problem with the way you decide to use your gun.
Yeah.
And that's the point that Jesus is making over here. The prophecy, however, being fulfilled, I think just means they're going to treat us like a bunch of bandits, and that's why He's talking about having swords.
My first thought was maybe He's saying you might need to defend yourself. You're going to be,
like the
you're going to
supplies.
be not for attack, but for defense.
Maybe.
I don't know. That was the first thing that came to my mind.
Well, the difference I'm hearing is that this sounds like, look, guys, you might have to go find something, kill it, and bring it home to eat, kind of thing. Go get your supplies. If you don't have a sword, go buy a sword, right? Or in modern day, if you don't have a gun, go buy a gun. I don't think he was saying, all right, we're going to have a war, stock up on everything you got.
No,
that's the difference in mentality.
I totally agree with that, because the way this plays out, when somebody actually used the sword, He reprimands them. None of this.
This is
Right, not this.
That's not what it's for.
Although, in a sense, for sure, Jesus is being arrested. That definitely cannot be stopped, because if you stop it, you're going to undo everything God. You know, so
Yeah.
in a way, it was certainly inappropriate there. But again, I know he's not advocating. Never did Jesus ever say, "Well, we're going to go out and wage war now."
Right.
You know,
There's
not that spiritual war, maybe, but not.
I do think we can put some boundaries on this so we don't go too far. But historically, there have been pacifist movements within the church. And some Christians thought you shouldn't get involved in war, you should never pick up a gun. In fact, one of the, wow, I'm drawing a blank now, but in World War I, one of our great heroes,
Elton York.
he started off as a pacifist. He did not want to get involved in the war because of his religious beliefs. And he ended up saving how many lives?
Oh, jeez.
He was like dozens and dozens,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's just a fantastic story, but he's a man of conviction, which I really appreciate that.
Well, you
Anyway.
had him, and then you had can't remember his name, but the movie
Hacksaw
Hacksaw Ridge was based on.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Strauss.
And he never picked up a gun during World War II.
Okay.
But he saved all those
Strauss,
men.
something like that.
Yeah. I don't remember, but anyway, there have been several people, and they're not wackos, they're not part of a cult. I mean, mainline Christian people who have felt strongly about, I can't pick up the sword, I can't do things like that. But there have also been, and I am on the other side, I think the arguments are stronger from Scripture. When John the Baptist was talking to soldiers and they wanted to know how to repent, he didn't say, well, you got to quit the army.
Yeah.
No, he said, don't extort money. Don't go beyond what you should do. In Romans, the 13th chapter, it says God has ordained that the government have the sword for the purpose of punishing the evildoer and protecting the innocent. Well, that's the purpose of police department and a just war. I do agree with the fact that if you were in Hitler's army, you should have refused to fight, right? Or in a lot of cases, you should refuse to fight. You're not just there because I'm there to fight. No, you do have to make moral judgments. But God ordained, it says God ordained governments to punish the evildoer as well as protect the innocent. So protecting the innocent would be just wars, where you've been attacked and you fight defensively. But beyond that, the Bible also says to punish the evildoer. So even if it's not a just war, if we send out the SEALs to take down Saddam Hussein and murder him, I'm totally in favor of that because I think the Bible endorses things like that. Okay.
In that case, it wasn't murder, it was execution.
There you go. I like that. I like that because when the Bible says thou shalt not kill, it does not mean you're not allowed to end human life. And we know that because Genesis 9 verse 6 says, whoever takes life by humans, his life will be forfeited because God made man in the image of God. Right. Since he's made in the image of God, if somebody dares to commit murder, then we have to enact capital punishment. We're supposed to, anyway, even though a lot of governments have decided they don't want to enact capital punishment, but there is a time for it.
By the way, it was Desmond Dross in World War II.
Thank you.
Saved all his lives.
Thank you. Thank you.
Probably
Yes.
getting a little bit ahead, but when I forget where I was watching the video, and it was talking about how when Peter cut the guy's ear off, that the law at that time was basically, okay, now you're going to be with Jesus and go to the cross and be executed along with him. And so by him saying, stop it, no more of the
He's protecting
him. There's no evidence that he cut the guy's ear off at that point, so therefore.
Yeah, because he healed. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, but there was enough witnesses there. They could have nailed him if they wanted to. I'm unsure of that concept, that they would be guilty of insurrection. Well, here's a big problem. They couldn't pin anything on Jesus. So they're trying to get Jesus to the cross. And they come up with, and we'll see this in just a little bit, they come up with 3 major charges, right? And Pilate sees right through 2 of them.
Right.
And he's kind of like, pfft. And then the third one, he does a quick interview of Jesus, and then he comes back and he says, this guy's not guilty. So none of the charges stick there. But the idea of him healing, the guy's name's Malchus, we don't learn it here, but he does heal his ear. And so that would be, but John's gospel is the one that really brings out the flavor of what you're talking about, because Jesus steps forward and says, who are you looking for? They said, we're looking for Jesus. He says, that's me. And he does it twice as if to say, leave everybody else alone. You're looking for me. Here I am. And the reason I always like that is because when he says it's me, everybody falls down.
Yeah.
all the guys with all the weapons and stuff, they're the ones that,
Yep.
right?
He's going because he's allowing it.
Yes! Yes, yes. And again, we're going to see that if we make it far enough tonight in his trial. We probably won't get that far, but if we did, Jesus refuses to speak. And one of the reasons, I don't think it's the only reason, but one of the reasons is if he would have spoken, he could have ended the whole thing and everybody would have gone home. And that's not what he wanted to do.
Isaiah just said that he would not speak.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. Like a lamb before its shears is silent. Yes. Good. Thanks, guys.
Malchus, I wonder if he became a Christian or not after he got healed.
Ooh, okay. We do have reference to, you know, the guy who carries the cross piece for Jesus when he, yeah, the Bible tells us his son's names. And one of his son's names is Rufus. And when Paul writes the church at Rome, he says, special greetings to Rufus. And so Simon's son, so some of these things, no doubt they had impact because like the centurion says, surely this was the Son of God. Mm-hmm. It does make you wonder, and the Bible follows up on some of those people. So yeah, good.
Hope so.
Yeah, I would think so too. Every Sunday while you're having communion, you rub your ear.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, yeah.
That was a close one.
Yeah.
Good point.
Unfortunately, though, not all the Jews responded the way they should, even in the face of overwhelming evidence. They still dug their heels in. I was listening to a presentation on the destruction of Jerusalem, and Josephus is our historical source for that, and he wrote extensively. I mean, we've got great detail on the destruction of Jerusalem thanks to Josephus. And one of the things the Jews mockingly said as their the temple is being destroyed and this city is being taken, the Romans they called them engines, but they were really catapults. And they would use battering rams and catapults. But the problem with the battering rams is some of the stones in the walls of the temple were the size of trailers on a semi. They were single stones were that big. So battering rams didn't do a whole lot of good. But the Romans used these white stones, like limestones, huge stones, and they would throw them over the wall. And the Jews would mockingly say, well, here comes the Son, not S-U-N, S-O-N, meaning the Son of God is trying to get back at us. Because they knew they crucified him. And they mockingly said that. Wow. Yeah. And this is a Jew historian writing that about his own people, saying that against the Christians while they're dying. You know, if ever there's a time where, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done all that bad stuff. But no, it's like they just dug in their heels and owned up to their rejection of Jesus. Okay, verses 39 through 44.
Jesus went out as usual to the Mount of Olives, and his disciples followed him. On reaching the place, he said to them, "Pray that you will not fall into temptation." He withdrew about a stone's throw beyond them, knelt down and prayed, "Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done." An angel from heaven appeared to him and strengthened him. And being in anguish, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was like drops of blood falling to the ground.
Yeah, this is one of those scenes that when we talk about Jesus suffering on the cross, some people actually think his suffering was as great or even greater here in his prayer to the Father when he realized what was going to happen, because he was going to take hell for everyone. And so his request is, if it's possible, notice he calls it this cup. And so we talk about the cup, again, if you're reading Jeremiah, just a couple chapters after what you're reading right now with him running the race, he's going to be told to take a cup and take it to the ambassadors of all these different countries and tell them to drink of it. And they'll say, well, we don't want to drink of it. He says, well, God's going to make you drink of it anyway, right? And it's a cup of poison. And so the cup, the idea of the cup of God's wrath, means God's judgment is coming. And so using that idea, this cup, well, what judgment from God does he want to avoid if he can?
All of our sins.
Hell. But then he says, so this is, I think this is his human nature just being honest with God. If there's any other way, but at the end of the day, nevertheless, not my will, but your will be done. Okay, go ahead.
I was going to say, where it's, the sweat was
Yes.
like drops of blood.
Yes.
To me, that's saying he was sweating profusely. It's not saying it was actual blood, because as we know, when we cut ourselves and how the blood
That's right.
spews out, so he was sweating very profusely is how I'm taking it.
You are exactly right. That's the way Luke presents it. We get the idea that his sweat was blood from Matthew, not from Luke. Luke is not making the point that his sweat was blood. He was just making the point he was sweating profusely. That's a good catch, because Luke is presenting it a little differently. The thing that always gets me, though, when Jesus prays in the garden, okay, Luke is, remember how Luke started off his gospel? Other people have already read the gospel. Right? And so he's just gathered some information to include some stuff for specific audience. He's really writing to the Gentiles. And he's not trying to restate everything that Matthew and Mark have said. So he's just trying to give a little different perspective and some information mainly for Gentiles.
Wasn't he the physician or something?
Yeah,
Yes, he
doctor.
is.
So he's going to take more of a descriptive,
Yeah.
Which,
By the way,
analytical.
he never tells us that he's a physician.
No, that was more of a historian thing, right?
Well, no, it's Paul who tells us
Paul.
that. Yeah, over in Colossians, the 4th chapter. And that's how we know he's a Gentile. Because Paul says, he mentions a bunch of names, and he says, and I think that's all the Jews. And then he says, and I've also got Luke, our beloved physician, and I've got this guy, and I've got this. So that's how we find he's a physician, and that he wasn't a Jewish guy, right? I love that. It's the pieces of the puzzle come together just from the letter in Colossians. Okay, but the part that gets me, he doesn't include the fact that he only called 3 of them. Remember this?
Yes.
Which 3 did he call? Peter, James, and John. He asked them to go a little bit further with him that they might pray. But he specifically says, I want you to pray for what?
Not to fall into temptation.
Yes, Jesus is concerned about these guys. He already said Satan's asked that he might sift you, Peter. And he, in essence, says, and after you mess up, I want you to make sure you come back and so he's concerned about them, and he knows what's going to happen. And then when it's time to pray, he wants them to pray with him, but he says specifically, pray that you don't fall into temptation, knowing that they are going to cave, right? But still pray about it so it won't be worse than it has to be, than it is going to be, right? Okay, the other thing that's really interesting here is verse 43, where it says, an angel from heaven appeared to him and strengthened him. That's all we know. Can't say much more about that or less about that. Yes?
Well, I have a footnote that says that 43 and 44 were not in earlier manuscripts, so I don't know if that matters or not.
Right.
Obviously got included.
Right. There's more than one reference, though, to the fact that the angels ministered to him. In fact, during the temptations of Jesus, after he was tempted, it tells us that the angels came and ministered to him. Perhaps, I'm just floating this idea, perhaps this is to remind us in the book of Hebrews, the 1st chapter, it talks about angels and how Jesus is much greater than angels, but it finishes off and says, it paraphrased, And you know what angels are for. God uses them for us. And so sometimes, again, the book of Hebrews, sometimes you run into a person and you think, well, that's a weird person. It wasn't a person at all. It was an angel, but you didn't know it was an angel. I don't want to push that too far, but the Bible does say things like that happen. Well, you know, there are times when you just run into situations and somebody helps you out, you don't even know who that was who helped you out. Well, we know angels are here to help the elect. We also know that sometimes they appear and you don't know who they are, right? And you've got a great story in the outline too. Yeah, have you heard his story with the car wreck?
Yes.
I don't think I've heard it.
No?
Just tell us the short version of it.
Okay, we were in a major accident where we rolled the vehicle 4 times. My wife was driving. I was in the back seat. We ended up on our tires and I got out. The section of the car had collapsed where my wife was driving. Luckily she was short, nothing reached her. So I was able to get out of the back and I grabbed the door handle. Now I'm in mid weightlifting career and I can't grab the door. And I get a little tap on the back. I look and it's a really small, old black man. And he goes, I got this. And he reaches over and just opens the door. So I reach back in and grab my wife and my son. And I look around and there's nobody there. Nobody. I went to thank him. And nobody came to stop yet to help us.
It's a real deal.
Yeah. And again, I don't want to read too much into it, but I do want to say that the Bible says that God uses angels at specific times, and sometimes we don't know who they are. Right?
It says we might be entertaining them and not know it.
Yes.
That is correct.
Yes.
That's why we know it is happening.
Yeah.
As far as, you made mention of Jesus being above the angels.
Yes.
Rightfully so. I mean, I guess this is going a little off the rails, but couldn't Jesus be friends with the angels?
Oh,
So
sure.
couldn't there be an aspect of, his friends coming and rallying with him? It's like, you've got the, basically, also helping him pump him up.
I actually like that because his companions here on earth let him down. Yeah, they kept falling asleep. And so that could well be. It could well be. Yeah. Yeah.
Just imagine that. This is terrible. Imagine the angel going like, "Come on, man, you got this. You got this. You can do this." I think it was more.
You know what though? According to, I think it's 1 Peter, the end of the first chapter, and then the second chapter. It wasn't just the prophets; even the angels couldn't figure this out.
Right.
Yeah. So the apostles, nobody figured out what was going on. I think there's a real reason for that because 1 Corinthians chapter 2 tells us that if the rulers of this world, and it uses the phrases there that describe Satan and his minions, if they would have known what was going on, they never would have got Jesus to the cross.
Yeah, that's right.
So Jesus was guarded enough. He knew exactly what was going to happen, but he was guarded enough that people around him didn't know, and even angels are there to, who knows, it may have been the kind of thing where, sometimes we put our arm around a brother and say, I have no idea why God's letting this happen to you, but I'll pray for you too. One of those kind of things. Maybe. I don't know. And again, I don't want to read too much into it, but the angels were there. And every now and then, it's like God pulls the curtain back and lets us know there's a spiritual realm that's going on. And the one other thing I've got to say, though, is he is, according to Hebrews, the first chapter, he's greater than the angels. But Hebrews also tells us that when he became human, he took a step down lower than the angels. So a period of time, he limited himself where angels could have been a real help to him while he was here in physical limitations. Right?
Yeah, one of those, just think after this, you're going to have all your
Yes!
power and authority back.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Okay. Let's have 45 and 46.
When he rose from prayer and went back to the disciples, he found them asleep, exhausted from sorrow. Why are you sleeping? He asked them. Get up and pray so that you will not fall into temptation.
Thank you. He's saying the same thing. He doesn't want to fall into temptation, but why are they sleeping?
Sorrow.
Sorrow. Luke gives us, because sometimes I'm a little bit hard on these guys because I'm like, come on, guys, every now and then you got to pull an all-nighter. right? When it's tough, right? But it's the sorrow that really gets them. Okay, what would they be sorry about?
Losing their friend and mentor.
Do they know that they're going to lose their friend and mentor?
He told them.
Okay, he told them, but do they know
I don't
it?
think so.
I agree with that. But they didn't understand that till after the fact, right? So why are they sorrowful? What did he just tell them at the meal?
Oh, Satan's asked to sift you.
And
I won't eat with you.
Somebody's gonna betray.
Oh, that's right.
yeah, you guys are all you're going to fail. Yeah. One of the other Gospels, I don't remember if it's, I'm going to assume it's Matthew. It says, strike the shepherd and the sheep will scatter. And he makes that point, you guys are all going to abandon me. At the meal, he said, one who dips his hand with me is going to betray me. And they're all turning to each other. It can't be me. It can't be me. And in essence, Jesus kind of says, well, it's all of you guys. So there's a lot for them to be sorry about if they're like, I can't believe I'm going to, no, it can't be me. I can't be the one who let Jesus down. But there may be more to it than that, but it's the sorrow that they're exhausted from. You've had that kind of exhaustion before, haven't you? Where it's not a physical exhaustion.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah.
It's almost like a not a depression, but there's like when you lose somebody in the family who you didn't expect to lose.
Yes.
And the entire family is just exhausted by the end of the day of dealing with it.
Yes.
It has nothing to do with physical exertion. It's just like, I am whooped.
Yes.
Today was just a horrible day, and I don't know how to, I'm just going to sleep.
Yeah.
You know, because I don't know what else to do. And
Yeah.
I'm just exhausted.
Spent.
Yeah, spent.
Yeah. Yeah. You're exactly right. That's well worded. And usually it's time of loss, something like that.
I was just thinking that's like a familiar thing that
Yes.
we understand. I don't know what they were going through necessarily, but
Yeah. Okay, let's have verses 47 to 48.
While he was still speaking, a crowd came up, and the man who was called Judas, one of the 12, was leading. He approached Jesus to kiss him. But Jesus asked him, Judas, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss?
Okay. Wow. Again, we're very familiar with this scene, but I like the way that Luke presents this because there's two things. When Jesus says, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss? First of all, obviously, he's pointing out his hypocrisy. Kiss. I've been reading, because I never have, and it's a classic, and I feel I get beat up every now and then. You've got to read the classics, right? One of the classics is The Brothers Karamazov. And it's kind of like, it's one of those Dostoevsky tomes. I mean, it's a tome. It's like, and so I'm listening to it in my car, and I don't know, I'm at hour 22 or something like that. I don't know that I'm halfway through yet or not. But this was written in the 1800s, and even in the 1800s in Russia, where men were really, they kiss each other on the lips. Ooh. And I'm like, ooh. I tell you what really got to me. You remember this guy named Vasily Alexeyev?
Yes.
After he was the first man ever to put 500 pounds over his head. When he came off the stage, his coach, big old burly guy, runs up to him and kisses him on the lips. And I'm like, no! I'm watching this as a kid on TV because I didn't understand Russian culture.
Right.
There was nothing gay about it at all. It's just the way they are. Okay. Kissing, by the way, was probably not on the lips, but it could have been. But when it talks about greeting each other with a holy kiss, it was talking about men to men and women to women. It was not talking about kissing the opposite sex. That's not the way they greeted people. But when you greeted somebody who was close to you, there would be physical contact, and sometimes there involved a kiss. And so the hypocrisy here is, you're treating me as though I'm a dear friend, and you're using the symbol of close friendship to actually betray me. So he's pointing out the hypocrisy. But there's a second level to this that because of what Matthew says, really gets to me. I wonder if he's not also saying, are you really going to betray me with a kiss? Are you really going to do that? As though he's saying to Judas, you can still stop this. You don't have to go through with this. It's still your decision, because Judas did have his own free will. He just made the wrong choice.
So then it has me a question. This still would have gone on because Jesus stepped up and says, I am he.
That's right.
He didn't even need the kiss.
That's right.
So Judas didn't have to.
He
He
didn't.
could have.
He didn't.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Well, there could be another reason. Jesus is just saying it out loud to make sure that the court reporting going on that we read today, you know.
There you go. Yes.
You know, it's like,
Yeah. That's a good point.
That's
Yep.
true too. But here's one of the things that gives me pause too. Yes, Judas betrayed him, but so did Peter. And all the apostles ran except Peter and John come back, and John Mark, who's not one of the apostles, and then John Mark gets scared to death and runs away naked.
Yep.
And then John's going to leave, but Peter, we're going to see what happens to Peter. Probably not. Yeah, we might make it. What happens to Peter is devastating. But just because everybody, it wasn't just Judas, everybody. Judas was the only one who didn't repent. That's really, and which, by the way, this is what I love about Matthew. Judas felt sorry. He felt really bad about it.
Mm-hmm.
But he's the only one who didn't come back to Jesus. I think there's a real lesson there. They all messed up, but they all came back, right? It seemed to be extra hard for Peter to come back, by the way. But he did come back. Judas is the only one who
well, I mean, put yourself in his shoes. He's imagining there's going to be a fight. I'm imagining, I'll die for you. I don't know what you're talking about, betrayals. And then when he swings his sword, because here's the fight, and he's like, no, none of this. This is not going to go down like this. And Peter's like, what are you talking about?
Yes.
So you take your courageous person, your courageous man that is ready to fight, ready to die, and you put him in the situation where everything is foreign now, and the person you look up to most is being like sacrificed. I understand why he would have run. He would have been so out of his element, not understanding what to do, scared for his own life, but also, I don't know what's going on, and then turn around and then come back, and you got to deal with that. And that's what he's like, it's so hard to come back because I betrayed him even though I said I wouldn't. I was ready to die.
Yeah. Good. You convict me because you make me think of the times where I'm convinced that, if somebody says something, I'm going to stand up and do the right thing, and I'm picturing in my mind an abrasive person. In reality, it's a little old lady who just keeps nagging and nagging and nagging. And I'm thinking to myself, well, God, if you would have sent a guy that was like this, I could have stood for him. But this lady's just driving me crazy. But anyway, in your mind, sometimes you're prepared for certain things. And it just seems like almost always it doesn't play out the way you pictured it in your mind. Right? So, yeah, good.
Like the 49ers thought.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yes, very good.
Low blow.
That hurt me.
Yes. Okay, so let's have 49 through 53.
When Jesus' followers saw what was going to happen, they said, Lord, should we strike with our swords? And one of them struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his right ear. But Jesus answers, no more of this. And he touched the man's ear and healed him. Then Jesus said to the chief priests, the officers of the temple guard, and the elders who had come for him, I am leading rebellion that you have come with swords and clubs. Every day I was with you in the temple courts, and you did not lay a hand on me. But this is your hour when darkness reigns.
Yeah, very good. Okay. When they ask, it just gets me. I appreciate the way you read this. Lord, should we strike them with our swords? And then one of them, before Jesus answers, one of them, we know it's Peter. It's kind of like they're all ready to jump in, but Peter's the one with the sword, cuts off the ear. Okay, Luke, we know what his profession is, right? Okay, he's the one, the gospel writer, that uses a medical term that lets us know it's only part of the ear. Kind of interesting. So he's a little bit more specific in his description. It's only part of the ear, but Jesus heals the ear, right? No more of this. Touched him, heals the man's ear. It's Malchus. Again, we find that out from Matthew. Then when he talks to them and asks if he's leading this rebellion, and I was with you in the temple courts, he's making a real point here. If I did something wrong, there's a way you could have taken care of this. And the point he's making is, you guys don't have legal ground to stand on. That's why you're doing this at night. And the word he uses here, when he says, this is your hour, when darkness, it literally, the Greek literally says, darkness has its power. And what's the power? Well, you don't have to play by the rules. You can do bad things, and you guys are doing bad things. So he's calling them out. He's going along, he's going to let them arrest him, but he's calling them out. So that maybe some of them repented later, we don't know. But at least they would remember, oh yeah, we didn't have legal ground to stand on. So if they recall Jesus' words, these are important. Verses 54 through, let's go ahead and go all the way down through 54 down through 62. Let's take that whole chunk.
Then seizing him, they led him away and took him into the house of the high priest. Peter followed at a distance, and when some there had kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard and had sat down together, Peter sat down with them. A servant girl saw him seated there in the firelight. She looked closely at him and said, "This man was with him," but he denied it. "Woman, I don't know him," he said. A little later, someone else saw him and said, "You are one of them." "Man, I'm not," Peter replied. About an hour later, another asserted, "Certainly this fellow was with him, for he is a Galilean." Peter replied, "Man, I don't know what you're talking about." Just as he was speaking, the rooster crowed. The Lord turned and looked straight at Peter, and then Peter remembered that the word of the Lord had spoken to him. "Before the rooster crows today, you will stone me 3 times." And he went outside and wept bitterly.
Wow, thank you so much. That's so true. You know, Luke is the one who tells us, verse 61, gives us that tidbit. While this is taking place, Jesus is taken, first of all, to Annas. Annas is not the high priest at the time, but he's called the high priest because he's former high priest. Caiaphas is the current high priest, but they take him to Annas first because he's the older guy and they respected their elders. So there's a courtyard area. So what we surmise is he's being interrogated by the former high priest, and then he's taken from one room to another through the courtyard area. He's coming through the courtyard area, and what's going on while he's in the trial are 3 different episodes. At the conclusion of that 3rd episode, he's coming across, and Peter looks up just in time for Jesus to look straight at him right after he denies him 3rd time. And while he's looking at him, the rooster starts crowing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. That's the scene. Here's the interesting thing. This term that he uses for looking at him is kind of a strong term in the Greek language, and it means with love and compassion.
Oh.
So it doesn't mean, "I knew you'd let me down." It's kind of like, like a mother would look at her child, right? So it's just, that had to be an extra twist the knife in your chest kind of thing, because you really, you were expecting a fight. It didn't play out that way, and yet you did deny him. Mark's gospel, which was written from Peter's perspective, tells us that he didn't just deny him, he cursed him.
That's right.
Ooh. Whoops. Stab it deeper and twist it more, right? Yes.
Didn't Mark know some of them in the courtyard? Wasn't it Mark that got him in there in the first book?
John was.
Or John.
John was known
It was John, okay.
to the high priest.
Yeah.
And John's gospel is the one that makes the point,
Okay.
because he never names himself. It says the one that disciple that Jesus loved was known to the leader, to the high priestly family, and was able to get him in.
Yeah.
And heard an old sermon years ago. I don't remember the sermon, but details of the sermon, except it played off of this idea that Peter was warming himself at the fire, and the whole sermon was warming yourself at the wrong fire. and the minister just played off the idea sometimes we're in the wrong places we shouldn't be, and that's one of the reasons we get into kind of trouble. Well, why was Peter here in the first place?
Following him.
Keep an eye on him.
He was following him.
At distance.
Probably not so that he would deny him. He's probably following him in case in case a fight breaks out, he can be the hero and stuff like that. But that wasn't the test. It wasn't a fight. It was the denial, which, by the way, this word, when it says he's denied him in the Greek language, this is the exact opposite for confessing somebody. Who was it who made the confession that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God? It'd be Peter. Yeah. The very thing that we're supposed to confess, and he denies it instead.
To the death.
Yeah. Okay. This is where we need to end, but I do want to ask you a question. He went outside and wept bitterly. This whole episode with Peter, why do you think this is included in the Bible? I mean, seriously, I think if Peter took a vote, he'd say, why don't we leave this? Well, no, he wouldn't, because he actually included it in Mark's gospel, right? But why do you think it's in here, Jesse?
We all let Jesus down.
Yes. Yeah, this is kind of maybe, remember when Paul said he was saved in order to show that me, the chief of sinners, if I can be saved, anybody can be saved. I think maybe Peter's doing his rendition of this, right? If a guy like me can come back and be used in his service, at least in the Gospel of Mark, but Luke's also going to include it for Gentile audience.
A lot of people put the apostles on such a high pedestal, and they're still human. They still suffer from the same thing we all do, which is this weakness of when the tough really gets going and things don't work out the way you think. Even the strongest, you would think the strongest, fail.
Yes.
So it's like, and he came back, but we're all susceptible.
And all this is hindsight for us.
Yeah.
Yes.
Being hard on the apostles is easy for us to do.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
But put yourself in
You know,
the time
also,
before.
you were saying the way Jesus looked. And if you ever, when you were a child, and your mother or father looked at you, it felt like you really let us down. That would crush you just bad enough, you know. So not only that he knew he denied him, but the look that he gave him, he says, you know, and you actually did it. Wow.
Yeah,
that's true. My dad only hit me once in my entire life, but when he said, I'm disappointed in you, it hurt me more.
Oh, yeah.
That really got me.
Yeah.
It really
Maybe
did.
it was one of the reasons it was so hard for Peter to be reinstated. You know, because after everything's over, even after he knew that Jesus rose from the dead, he went back to fishing. And Jesus had that special visit and in essence said, no, you're supposed to be you're not allowed to go back to fishing. Right? Yeah. What were you going to say, Randall? Were you going to make a comment?
Just kind of echoing, it was that our closest loved ones, you know, although meaning the best, we're all susceptible to it. So it's like if the apostle, and especially Peter, all of them, but especially Peter, can utterly betray Jesus like that, and especially in a time of just like Kevin was saying, confusion and just it's like don't be surprised when any of your loved ones do the same thing.
Yeah, that's a good point too. When you're in the other position and somebody else lets you down. Yeah, looking at that from that perspective, that's good. And I'm just really taken with the idea too that sometimes it's not what we think. Makes me think, I don't remember any of the details of the song, I just remember there was a song back when I was in college, and the basic idea of the song was, I was really prepared for the devil, I just never knew that the devil would have blue eyes and blue jeans. Yeah. I was expecting a fight, instead came the temptation, and it just kind of hits me that sometimes we prepare ourselves for scenarios instead of just being the person of character that can maintain in any scenario, So, because this is where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah.